everyone. Today we'll see how we can automate the ZAP using the RestAssured APIs instead of using zapClient APIs. So why we are going to do that? Because there are two main benefits of doing that. The first one is that as we have seen earlier during our zapClient API automation videos, that traversing the response of a zapClient API sometimes it becomes kind of hectic to do that, because we need to see the API response element, API response list, then there is API response value maps as well. So those kind of things sometimes it becomes difficult to traverse those kind of responses. So it's really easier to traverse the JSON as we do in our REST assured automation. The second is, like, of course, if you are already familiar with the REST assured, we have like a lot of endpoints available for the ZAP. Using those endpoints, we can perform all the things that we were performing with the zapClient API. Okay, so this will be the agenda for the day. We are going to compare the REST assured way of automation with the zapClient API way of automation, and then we are going to perform a basic active scan and report generation using the REST assured. So now let us move to IntelliJ. We'll see zapClient API way of automation, and we see how we achieved like most basic things of automation using the zapClient API. So for this, you can also refer to the playlist of like third video of the playlist of automating the security testing using zapClient API and Java. And I have taken the third part of our playlist, and there you can see how we created this project. So just I'll give just a high level overview of the same thing. So we have a, like, here we have a pom.xml, and in this pom.xml we are using the zapClient API, and within our pom.xml we have defined our testng.xml. In our testng.xml we have a basic zap test defined. In our zap test we are calling the zaputil method to perform the scans, wait till the scan is completed, adding the URL to the scan tree. So this zaputil class, this will be the class where the difference will be lying in both the projects, like in the project which we have created using REST assured and in this particular project. So just to give a high level overview, like here we initialize the client API instances, proxy API responses, and then we defined the ZAP address, ZAP port, and API key. We had a static block where we initialized the static data member in form of client API and proxy. This proxy we use to scan through the Selenium WebDriver instance. So we set up the proxy in our WebDriver instance, and whenever the URLs were opened using those particular that particular driver instance, our proxy was coming into the picture. The URLs were getting added to the scan tree, and the passive scan was performed automatically. And once the URLs were in the scan tree, after our passive scan is completed, of course, we can go ahead and perform the active scan as well. And this was the way we were performing the passive scan. For this, like, you can refer to the second and third and first video of that playlist, and you'll get to know that how this project was built from the scratch. But this was just like way of waiting till our passive scan is completed. So you can take the reference of the local APIs that we have in our ZAP, right? So if you go to the local host where your ZAP is initialized, you can open the ZAP, and here you can see where you can access the ZAP local APIs. So you go to local APIs, and here we need to look for pscan, and here you have the all the actions request to scan. Like, it is a view that we need to perform, we need to kind of see the results, so that's why it is under view. And whenever you need to perform actions, these are the actions related endpoint for the passive scan. So you see the description here, the number of records the passive scan still has to scan. So on basis of that, if you see here, we fetch the API response. We kind of took the value out of that API response which we need to check. Like here under this API response, you will see this uh, records to scan kind of parameter, and you are just taking the value out of that and storing it in the temp well, and you are just checking if that records to scan becomes 0, that means our passive scan is completed. And here we added the URL to the scan tree. We get the URL from the scan tree. We perform the active scan using a scan, and we waited till the active scan is completed. Then we generated the ZAP report, right? So on high level, these are the things that we achieved through zapClient API. Now let me give a quick overview of how we achieved the same thing in this particular project. So this particular project also has the same kind of structure. We have a pom.xml. So in this pom.xml, instead of using zapClient API, I'm using RestAssured here. And this is the testng.xml. In testng.xml, we have zap test defined. In our zap test, we are referencing to the zap util. Now under our ZAP util, here we will be hitting the different endpoints which are there for ZAP. So for this thing, first of all, what you can do, you can go to the API references that we have on this particular URL. So for opening this, you can just do one thing. You can go to Google and here hit ZAP client API references. Open this link, and here you will find the endpoints defined. Like if I go to a scan, so here you can see the parameter which this particular endpoint going to take, and the responses which this particular endpoint is going to give it to us. So if we go to say a scan view scan, right? So we just need to hit this endpoint, and of course it will be taking one query parameter which is in form of API key, but apart from except from that, there's no parameter that it is going to take. And if you go to the action one, like every endpoint has a view and a action type. So if you go to action, so here we can see the a scan action scan. So you will find the description here. You see the endpoint which we need to hit and the parameter which this particular endpoint is going to take, whether this is a required parameter or not, right? So this kind of information we'll be having on this particular page. So on basis of that, first thing we can do is like we can set up the postman as we have done it earlier throughout our uh, like framework build up for zapClient API automation related playlist. There you can see how we created the endpoint. So we have just taken the references from here, and whenever we needed to perform any thing, we were setting up the postman for that, and then we were using the zapClient API as well to achieve the same thing. So once you have this postman set up, you can achieve the things in rest assured very easily, right? So let me go to this particular project now. Now let us compare both the projects. So here this is our zapClient API related project. Here we have a static member in form of client API, proxy API reference, API response, and here we have in form of request specification. This proxy is as it is, and then response, and then these three parameters are also as it is. In our static block, there we initialize the client API. Here we are initializing the request specification. If you see request specification request, and the proxy, it remains the same. So here we are passing the base URL for our endpoints which we are going to hit, and then this query parameter will be there always. So we are defining the same query parameter here, and if you see, same kind of information we passed in our client API as well. Then wait for passive scan. So you can just take this particular endpoint, and we need to scan, we need to fetch this particular like response from this particular parameter from our JSON response, and once we get it, we just need to check whether this becomes 0. So same thing, if you remember, like we discussed that how we achieve the same thing in zapClient API. So here we are just traversing the JSON, and picking up the parameter that we need to scan, and again checking whether that particular value becomes 0. Okay, and similarly you can do the same for add URL to the scan tree. We are hitting the endpoints only. We are checking the response, asserting on that. Like if you see the start active scan, so in the start active scan, what we are doing, like we have this particular endpoint a scan action and scan. We are just passing the query parameter in form of site to test. So if you will compare both of this, like site, let me open that particular perform active scan. Yeah, so here uh, the other difference, like the main difference which lies is, like if you see the start active scan, here we are not doing a lot of things, we are not defining a lot of unnecessary things. We know like what parameter that is mandatory and what parameter we need to pass. But in this case we were using, like if you see, it is a method ascan.scan in zapClientAPI, so which was taking these many parameters, so we had to pass all of these parameters. But in this we are like, we get the flexibility that we can send only that particular query parameter which we require, other things we do not need to pass. So this can also be considered as the advantage. No need to pass unnecessary parameter to achieve any action from there. So this is also one of the benefit. So here we can start the active scan in this manner, and we have already seen the documentation of this, like a scan action scan, and this is the endpoint json a scan action scan. We are hitting the same thing, and this json we have already defined in our base url, so that's why we are not going to define this json here. And once our active scan is completed, we can fetch the response here. See if we go the 200, that means active scan was started, and this is like waiting for active scan to get completed. So for this again you can refer here and is can view status. So this will give you the status, and here you can check whether it is 100. If it is 100, that means the scan is completed, otherwise it is not completed. So if you see how we achieve the same thing in our zapClientAPI, so we perform kind of same thing here, right? So this is self-explanatory. Now we just need to hit the endpoint and assert and check wait while this becomes 100, and if it is not 100, then keep hitting this endpoint again and fetch this value again and see if the status is 100 or not. Then the last part is creating the report. So here we have defined some of the parameters, so we need not to define all of these null, and the one which are like in black, I do not need to use these parameters. So this is like one flexibility which is there, so I'm going to remove all of these because we are not going to pass them in any method. But if I'll quickly show you how we were doing the same in zapClientAPI, and instead of defining these things here, you can just directly define these things here as well in your query parameters. So like we defined all of these things here, whether these were null or not, we were passing it anyway in this particular method of generating the report, right? But here we just need to pass these parameters, like we set up the query parameter here, we pass these in the form of query params here, and then we get the we hit this particular endpoint and it will generate the report, right? For this you can also go to, like you can go to both the places, you can go to local apis as well and that api reference as well. You can get the information from both these places. So if I go to the reports and if I go to this action generate, so here you will be able to see all the query parameters. So I've taken the query parameters from here. We can see the description of each query parameter here, and we hit this endpoint, and we also assert on the response. So if I try to do the same thing here, so once there is a successful generation, you will see this kind of status, this kind of message in the response. So this will be your response body, and you can just make a assert on this thing, like whether the report name that you have defined. As of now here in this particular report, I haven't defined the report name, that's why it is generated on basis of date. So this is the default behavior, but in case you define a report file name, like in my case report file name is this, you can just perform a assert on that. Like if the response body or string contains the ZAP report file name, that means the ZAP report has been created, right? So now what I'll do, I'll run a simple test of performing an active scan and generating and waiting till the scan is completed, and also will generate the report using this. So for that I have this opened already. OWASP ZAP is open. Now I'm going to hit it. So project is building, and now this URL which I have taken is 8080. On this URL I have Jenkins set up, so that Jenkins URL will be scanned. Localhost 8080. Yeah, here it is. Like we I have a Jenkins set up here, so that will be scanned here. And here you can see that active scan is in progress. And if we go to ZAP, here we can see the status is 23%. So it will see this message till the time we have something like of 100 status achieved. So once it is 100, that will mean the scan is completed. If we see the alerts, we already have some of the alerts here. And this 403 we can avoid for now. This is just a sample site we have taken. We haven't defined any auth kind of thing, like we haven't used any context. So for if you want to check how the authorization is done and authentication is done in ZAP, you can refer to the playlist uh, where I have defined like how we can perform the authorization authentication in OWASP ZAP, and the video number is I guess 6th, 7th, and 8th in our automated security scan using zapClient and Java playlist. So now this is 100%. That means active scan has been completed. A report was also generated. You can avoid this warning. This warning is due to one of the parameters that I have defined in my run configuration. That was for debugging purpose, default count. So let me just quickly check. Yeah, this is just for that forking. So now we just need to check whether our report is generated or not. So for that, you can see other report is generated here. I'm going to just open this in Explorer. So if you see demo file name, this has been created at 1101, right? So this is the report that we have just created, and if you see the name that we have provided was this demo file name only, and we should see all the alerts which were there. Like we have 2, 4, 6, and 3, in total 9 alerts. And if you go to alerts, yeah, we have all the 9 alerts mentioned here. So all of these alerts are fetched into our HTML report. So this is it for the agenda for today. If I go to the notes section, these are all the benefits that we have seen, right? We do not need to traverse the complex ZAP client API responses. We can just traverse the JSON. And if we are familiar with REST assured, it becomes really easy to hit the ZAP endpoint. We can refer to either this documentation which is available here, or we can also refer to the local APIs data that is in our local host. And the third was like we do not need to provide unnecessary parameters arguments to the functions. We can just pass the query parameters as per our requirement and hit that particular endpoint, and we'll be sorted. And we have like compared the REST assured way of automation with the zapClient API way of the automation, and we have also performed a basic active scan and report generation using the REST assured. So this is it for today's video guys, and I'll be sharing the source code and the notes in the description section of the video. In case you have any query, any feedback, any suggestion, please share the same in the comment section. And in case you're liking the content that I'm making, please do like and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with your QA friends. Thank you guys. See you in the next video.